Welcome, insiders. Brian Reese here, coming at you live from Austin, Texas. I got a special treat today. My friend, my brother, I consider him a mentor, Mr. Mike Sarraille is joining us.
I don't know about a mentor, but no. Brian, good to see you, man. Live in the same town, and sometimes we go months without seeing each other, but that's also a byproduct of entrepreneurship and running companies.
Absolutely. And for anyone who doesn't know, Mike is former Navy SEAL, just a complete badass, and he's going to share a little bit about his background. But this is a special treat for us today to really get in the mind of somebody who's been there, done that in the military, somebody who's transitioned to become a very successful entrepreneur and speaker, author. I think he's got 2 books, probably working on book 3 and 4. And the other thing I love about Mike is his heart. He cares deeply about giving back, especially to the military and veteran community. So again, Mike, welcome. Happy to have you, bro.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me, man.
Mike, just so you know, there's probably a lot of vets who follow our channel at VA Claims Insider that probably don't know you or they've never heard of you. Would you mind sharing just a little bit about your background so folks can understand?
Yeah, like 99.9% probably don't know me, and that's okay. So I actually started out in the Marine Corps. I met a Force Recon Marine. I was like 18, 19, 140 pounds. This guy was just like a beast, really humbly confident and just nice compared to all the other Marines that were like not combat arms. And so you have the biggest badass that treats people with like respect and kindness. And I'm like, dude, I want to be just like you. And when college didn't work out, he and another staff sergeant guy named Omar helped me enlist, and then went off to the Marine Corps and made it into recon, did the scout sniper thing. And then this was prior to 9/11. The Marine Corps is like, hey, are you interested in a commissioning program? And the Marine Corps has a badass commissioning program for enlisted called the Marine Enlisted Commissioning Education Program, the MECEP. So you basically get to go to college on active duty, and I was a sergeant, or I think I picked up sergeant right when I got there. So I'm getting paid as a sergeant to go to school, and then you use your Montgomery GI Bill. It was Montgomery GI Bill back then to pay for education. Plus, I know you get a little stipend from that. So it's like double dipping. Plus, I had a job bouncing, so I loved it, dude. Went to Marine OCS after my first year. Literally graduated Marine OCS honorman in August. September 11th happened less than 2 weeks later, and I almost called my detailer and said, hey, send me back to First Recon Battalion. And it was my old man who said, hey, man, this is going to be a long war. He knew I wanted to become a SEAL. He said, stay the path. Best advice I ever got. I did an inter-service transfer and joined the SEALs as an officer, and it was just a great ride. 3 deployments to Iraq, which was the focus with SEAL Team 3, the Battle of Ramadi, Battle of Sadr City in 06 and 08 as 2 of the 3 deployments. And then went back to BUDS as an instructor, training the junior officers to be future ground force commanders. And while I was there, I got picked up to try out for JSOC, made it through the training and spent most of my career there, surrounded by just absolute studs. And I'm not only talking about the operators, I'm talking about every support billet, from admin to logistics to the dog handlers to human. Even our travel department, everyone was a badass. Everyone was competent in their job, and it made you work harder to earn your place to stay there. But eventually, I think it was my 11th deployment, my 10th combat deployment. I was actually with the Army JSOC component doing a troop commander over there, and it just, we were the first ones in for ISIS, and we had no authorities to do anything, and I just, the politics catches up with you.
Yeah.
And I lost my passion. Plus, I was going through a divorce. So God bless the SEALs. They sent me to the University of Texas Naval ROTC, and I got my MBA while I was there. And when it was time to go back, I was at like 19 and a half years. And a guy who's now an admiral called and said, hey, what do you want to do? And I'm like, sir, I think I'm just done.
Yeah.
And he's like, you've done your time, put a package in, and I retired.
Wow. What was it like to know that you're done? Like, just to have that feeling of like, I'm done. Do you remember?
Yeah. And there was multiple reasons why I was done. One, the politics. Two, there was a leadership challenge that I dealt with, which I did not like the response of one of my leaders, who I was supposed to be an executive officer for. He's not a bad guy. And maybe there was a little immaturity in the fact that I couldn't look past the incident, but I lost faith.
Yeah.
What I think naturally, and I think a lot of people will resonate with this, is like it was the boys. Um, I didn't want to leave the boys. I felt like I was letting the boys down, and you're losing your tribe. And when I moved from Virginia Beach to Austin, like I knew no one. I was by myself, and like talk about going withdrawals from coming from the greatest support network and tribe there is in the world, where everyone has buy-in, emotional buy-in, because we all volunteered, we all believe in the country, we all believe in the purpose in the time of the global war on terror, which was to eradicate just what we consider pure evil. And again,
Yeah.
based on the things we watched them do in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places, they are. Um, and that hurt, man. Is so while
Yeah.
I knew it was the right call for myself and my family, I felt like a complete quitter in some senses, like a complete failure. And what runs through my mind is people are like, I don't care what people think. No, everyone freaking cares what people think. That's, if not, you might get checked for narcissism or sociopathic tendencies. And that weighed in. Like, what are my guys going to think of me? And surprisingly, the guys respected the decision. They're like, hey, dude, everyone has a different time. Some guys go 30 years, some guys go 20 years, some guys go 10 years, 5 years, and that's
Yeah.
just their time. And
Yeah.
I still miss it, man. I still miss. And for the veterans listening, ones that are about to transition out or retire, or ones that are freshly out, like you'll never replace that. And while that sounds horrible, also smile on the fact that you got to sense it where 99.9% of Americans don't, is that we felt
Yeah.
that tribe. We felt that homecoming belonging for which they will never know. And life is about losing things. And eventually that ride has to come to an end. It's a young man's game or a young
Yeah.
person's game. And I will always miss the tribe more than I miss the military and being told what to do.
Bro, I mean, hearing you share that, and thank you for that vulnerability. It's something I felt too, taking off the uniform. I felt a little bit like a quitter. Felt like I couldn't sack it up and do a full career. I felt like I mean, I knew it. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do another deployment, and it kind of weighs on you. You start to ask questions about yourself. You doubt yourself. You start to think that maybe you're less than, maybe I wasn't good enough, maybe I wasn't cut out for this. And there were a lot of dark moments for me, and self-doubt. And then, getting ready to transition, it's like, the military is the only thing I'd ever known since I was 19 years old.
Yeah.
And here I am 10, 11, 12 years later. Dude, I didn't even know what I was good at anymore. Like, I mean, I remember transitioning, thinking to myself, like, who the hell would want to hire me? Like, I got all these issues. Like, I don't, I've just been told what to do for the last 10 years. Like, is, is a company even going to want to work with me? Am I going to fit in at that company? I mean, I really struggled when my time was done. And so thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Mike, special operators. Uh, I think a lot of times people see special operators, especially SEALs. You've seen a lot of movies and media and shows and what have you on the SEALs. What's something about the SEALs that people don't know that's like outside of what they maybe see in the media?
You bring up a great point. For those that have never served, their perceptions of the military are shaped based off of Hollywood. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking Hollywood, because Hollywood is also the greatest recruiting tool the military has, uh, bar none. I mean, you talk to guys who joined after Vietnam for watching, John Wayne and the Green Berets or the Men with Green Faces. It's a powerful recruiting tool. But we all know, though, for those that serve, that Hollywood does not accurately paint the warriors we know. Now, there's a difference between warriors and war fighters. War fighters, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. War fighters are trained in the art of war. Uh, Warriors are as well, but warriors carry or live by a code that I've seen some war fighters not live by. And I'm not going to name names or give examples, but there were guys who I served with in the SEALs and other communities that just, in terms of character, like I didn't trust, and uh, were lacking or wanting in a lot of areas. Um, but special operators, just like anyone else in the military, are common folk with an uncommon desire to succeed. They've got a growth mindset. They just have this no quit mentality. There is this humility that's often not depicted with great special operators. And don't get me wrong, there's special operators who are more arrogant than anyone I know, and their narcissism is off the charts. But I like to say the most elite warriors I ever served with, and I don't consider myself one, were at JSOC, and I don't think that's up for debate. Those are the most lethal warriors in the world. And what people get wrong is that one, they're usually statistically older. I think some of the highest average ages in the military are within those units. I mean, especially the TF-160. If you look at those guys, and like they're all in their late 30s or 40s. God bless them. But they were kind, they were empathetic, they were respectful. And often you'd hear the phrase like, just be a freaking human being when dealing with situations in which these guys were really, really good about dialing down or dialing up their empathy, dialing it down when they needed to pull the trigger on somebody who just doesn't deserve to live, and then dialing it back up because all of a sudden there's some non-combatants in a space, a child crying, and you'd see them pick them up, get them out of harm's way, break out a chem light, and get the kid to start laughing, on a target where shots were just fired 3 or 5 minutes earlier. So, I mean, fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, it's, that's how they should be painted. But then you go to shows like SEAL Team, and they do play to a lot of the lowest common denominators, that we're all broken and things like that. But great people in the special operations community, but there's great people within the military. Some just decide to go a different path and not do special operations. And I meet some of them and I'm like, damn, dude, we really need you on this side of the wall. But they just, they chose their path for a reason.
Yeah. SEAL Team, the show. What's, in your opinion, what's not accurate about it? Since maybe folks who are listening to this have seen SEAL Team. If you haven't seen the show SEAL Team, by the way, it was a real popular series.
So one, I'm a big fan of David Boreanaz. I had him on the Everyday Warrior podcast through Men's Journal. The guy is trying to help veterans in a lot of ways. And they understand it's Hollywood at the end of the day. You've got to keep the audience engaged and coming back. And it seems like every week they're in some combat scenario, like they're flying away. That wasn't always the case. During the height of the global war on terror, we were deployed almost nonstop. But I mean, again, it shows like that young men are watching. They're like, oh, I want to go be in special operations, albeit a SEAL or Green Beret or anything else. But it seems like they're deploying all the time. And while I wish that were the truth while I was there, it wasn't always. We deployed for a certain period of time and came back. And yes, we were always prepared to rapidly deploy. But SEAL Team also is and maybe they go a little over the top, but again, they have to because it's Hollywood. They do depict some of the silent battles that the guys are fighting, from the post-traumatic stress to just trying to keep their bodies in the game, which was a common fight at that level. Because again, guys are older, they have multiple deployments under their belt. But in the end, I do appreciate that there are shows like SEAL Team or I hate to say NCIS. I don't appreciate that show since I was investigated by them. quite duplicitously. But there's shows out there that again that lend to recruiting young men and women, which I encourage, dude. You know, I I don't know where I'd be without my time in the military. I don't even want to fathom it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that too. Um, you mentioned post-traumatic stress and mental health. I want to peel that onion just a minute. And one of the things we tell our community all the time, tons of veterans, um, like we're like, look, let's just freaking get over it and let's go right at it. The fact is, we got a lot of mental health issues in this community. We just do. From post-traumatic stress to depression to anxiety to whatever. There's lots of issues. And we encourage our vets, Mike, to just be real and open and honest about it. And I think that there's this perception that if you've got some mental health stuff going on, that you're weak, you're less than. Um, can you talk about that from your perspective? Like, where are you at on mental health and in the special operator community? How seriously is that taken?
So, you know, I come from this from both directions, and what I see with a lot of veterans is there's like one camp, like we're broken, we need services and support, and while that may be true, you got to take ownership over your recovery. So, when I joined in '98, mental health wasn't really a topic, at least not one that I remember. It may have been brought up, but there's a lot of suffer in silence, which has a stigma to it. We do want to promote mental toughness, but we also do want to promote what I think is a very masculine trait, vulnerability. Notice I say vulnerability, not victimhood. And there's a distinct difference between the two. It is okay to say, hey, man, mentally, what I just saw on that target, that little girl that was injured by the breaching charge, that's in my head, man. I'm not feeling right. And for that, like, I applaud somebody and say, okay, hey, man, let's have a conversation if need be. Let's get you talking to somebody, and let's identify how we get you back to normal. But there's also a lot of veterans, as in society, because mental health is a subjective diagnosis. It's not objective. Um, and mental health within this country has skyrocketed. But I do feel, and again, trying to be empathetic and not disrespectful, I do feel that a lot of people put themselves in that victim category because it's so easy to stay there. Woe is me. It's not my fault. The government needs to give me services to get better. And they just want to stay there because it's fixed minded that you're not in control of your agencies or your outcomes. And I disagree with it. I'd love to help veterans, but once I identify that the veteran doesn't want to help themselves, there's nothing I can do until, they either hit rock bottom and realize that they need to take proactive steps to get better. But mental health, one, post-traumatic stress are the normal reactions to the abnormal conditions of war. In World War II, saw it to a degree that our generation never did. And I try to remember that. I try to remember those soldiers that saw as close as you can get to hell, where 4,000, I think it was 4,000 soldiers were killed during D-Day alone. Pretty much a little less than what we lost in the global war on terror. I tried to keep that in mind, and those guys came home and they just gritted through and got to work. But again, those are normal reactions to what you saw. It doesn't mean you're weak. And you have to, I think, shift your mind away from post-traumatic stress and go to post-traumatic growth. That what we saw and what we encountered, if you reflect and process it accurately, and that's different timelines for different people, you realize that you are a kinder, more empathetic, respectful human being. You're more willing to help your fellow man. You realize that life isn't about you. It's about us. And I do believe that, but veterans have to be very careful about not placing themselves in the victim category, which society wants you to do right now, and blame other people. No, you got to identify, one, or admit that, like, hey, I'm not right. Two, what steps are needed to get back to health, both mentally and physically. And for the veterans that, just fall right into that victim category. I'm not, again, I'm trying to be empathetic, but you're doing a disservice for the rest of us, because that's people are going to hone in on that and say, "Oh, I know this veteran who's all messed up and blah 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 blah." And here's a interesting fact: a guy named Dr. Chris Free, who's within range of releasing a book called Operator Syndrome, a VA clinical psychologist. During his time, he actually found that the degree of veterans claiming combat related mental issues was highly, highly elevated and fictitious, where he'd go back and check records and the guys were talking about combat they saw in Vietnam when the guy was not in a line outfit. He was not going into combat. Maybe his base got mortared a couple times, but that the tails start to grow like the fish in Texas. My fish was this big. So we got to be wary about telling combat stories. I've gotten away from telling combat stories. I'll occasionally tell one to reinforce a point, a leadership point, but you see it, Brian. You run into a vet where it's just like they go right to doom and gloom and how everything is not their fault, and it's just like, hey, it was very nice to meet you. I wish you the best. I hope you go and find help and actually put the work in to get back to health. And again, I know there's vets that what I just said, they're going to have an allergic reaction. I'm with you. I'm one of you. And it's not a lack of empathy. Sometimes like some veterans just need a swift kick to the ass of remember who you are, what you were taught and where you come from, and put those principles to action and live. And well, I lost so many brothers. Yeah, so did I. And guess what? The best thing we can do is live healthy, impactful lives for them who cannot be here.
Man, I don't think you could have said it better. And it's interesting in the work that we do, right? Helping veterans get the benefits that they've earned for serving our country. And I'm asked that question a lot, like how many fakers do you see? Like how many people are faking combat? How many people are making up the mental health issues, et cetera, et cetera. Look, I don't have data on that. That's not something that I'm going to track. Obviously, we tell veterans that, the truth and accuracy here is on you. Do not ever lie or stretch the truth. Do not make up situations. Don't tell the VA that you were part of a SEAL team kicking indoors when you were actually in the Air Force and you never deployed, right? That's called lying. Okay. Don't do that. Number one, it's against the law. It's illegal. And number two, it gives the rest of us a bad name. And so, don't do that. And I think it dishonors the folks who really did some of those horrific things, kicked indoors, lost brothers, had them die in their arms. And I know, Mike, I mean, I know some of your story and what you went through, but I think that the biggest thing that I pulled out of what you just said, and I want to reiterate with our audience, right, of fellow insiders, fellow vets, including spouses and active duty who are hearing us talk. The goal is not to get worse. The goal is to get better. And I think that there's this mindset of, yeah, but the VA or the government might take away my benefits. You know what? So be it. Again, the goal is not for you to stay stuck or get worse. It's to get better. And the only way you're going to get better is by admitting to yourself that you ain't right, or you got a problem, or you're, struggling with drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex, you name it. And you have to make the decision that you're going to do something about it, that you're not going to stay stuck. And, that's really what you're talking about, Mike, is it's like, hey, yeah, you can sit back and play victim. You can sit back and blame your situation on everybody else, or you can step up to the plate and take another swing and go, you know what? I'm going to get back in the game here. I'm going to take step one. I'm going to work on my mental health. I'm going to work on my diet and I'm going to start an exercise routine, and I'm going to start reading every single day. You know, I'm a busy guy. I'm single. I got 2 kids. I'm going to start reading books every day again. And I'm going to start working on my spiritual fitness again. But guess what? Nobody's going to do this for you. You have to decide that. And I agree. I think you're in one of two camps. You're either playing victimhood, woe is me, I'm going to live off the government and give what they gave me, or you're going to say, screw that. I'm better than this. I'm going to get back into the workforce. I'm going to do something. I'm going to start a company. I'm going to provide for my family. I'm going to fix my mental issues because I ain't a victim. Right. And I think it's a mindset thing. And I mean,
It's 100%,
I
100% a
think,
mindset thing.
I think this is a great transition here. You wrote a book called The Everyday Warrior, which I love, by the way. I think I've got like 97 pages creased and underlined and circled. But your book, The Everyday Warrior, talks a lot about mindset of a warrior. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. And I want to make one comment here. You nor I are saying we're the arbiters of whose stories are accurate and whose are not. And like, I don't want to get in that game. I just dealt with some veterans that are like, hey, some guy's claiming things that he shouldn't be claiming. And it was almost like a immature, like tit for tat. I'm like, fellas, one, I understand why some people may take exception to that, but who really freaking cares? And actually what the guy was saying was not inaccurate, saying he was with a special operations unit in a support role. He was with that special operations unit. He's not claiming that he was a special operator. And like sometimes, you know what, funny enough, leave it to veterans to hate on other veterans. Like it is like, it's almost like an industry of itself. Hey, there are some veterans out there, especially SEALs, that have been wildly successful that within the community had horrible reputations and were not performers. That's not for me to decide. And deep down, I'm like, hey, good on them. They created a brand. They're doing well. Like maybe I can learn a thing or two from them. Do I did I like him as a SEAL? Maybe not. Doesn't matter, man. My feelings are inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. But you do like, to this mindset question, the warrior mindset it's no different than the growth mindset. And first off, the reason I said everyday warrior and where that comes from, that same guy, Dr. Chris Free, when I ran into some self-destructive habits towards the end of my career, because mainly of what he diagnosed as survivor's guilt, he's the one that pulled me out of a hole, but I was willing to put the work in. Even though he was based out of Hawaii, we would speak a couple of times a week for 1-hour blocks. He would give me homework assignments, and he helped pull me out of a hole alongside a great woman who I now call wife. But I was willing to put the work in because I also have kids depending on me. And then at the time, my girlfriend, now my wife, she was depending on me. And I'm like, you know what? This isn't about me. This is about them. I've got a job to do. I need to provide for my family. And, some vets come up and they're in horrible shape and they're complaining. And you're like, hey, dude, step one, we had standards within the military with regards to like health. You got to get back there, man. Like with the everyday warrior, we talk about 3 pillars: physical fitness, mental fitness, not mental health, mental fitness. Cause the mind, the brain is not a muscle, but I consider it one. And your brain is only as strong as you test it. And then spiritual fitness. Yeah. But the foundation to all of those is physical fitness. You've got to be in some semblance of health. If you are 5'6" and 250 pounds, like you can't tell me you're happy. You can't look me, and I'm not fat shaming anyone. You cannot look me in the eyes and tell me that you're happy with who you are. You are building your foundation on very, very weak ground. So, I mean, the warrior mindset with Chris, I kept saying, yeah, I'm no longer a warrior, man. And that was all I knew. That was my DNA. That was my tribe. And he asked me who's one of the biggest warriors I know outside of the military. I said, my mom. And he's like, so she's an everyday warrior. And I'm like, very much the definitional one. And he said, so why are you not a warrior anymore? I said, yes, you don't carry a gun. You're not wearing a uniform, but why wouldn't you carry that mindset into everything you do? And that's where the everyday warrior was born. This guy helped me realize that warrior is less about the professional arms and more about a mindset and approaching life in the same manner as which we did in the military, with a bias for action, with a positivity, with an understanding that failure is the stepping stone that catapults us to success, and it is the greatest learning tool there is if you can approach it with a positive mindset. Understand that failure again is part of the process. It's there to teach you. And that book, one, was not about me. I wrote about the amazing men and women that I served with that are no longer here, and hence why 50% of the proceeds are split between Special Operations Warrior Foundation and Folds of Honor. So with all my books, I don't, there I was surrounded by grenade pins. I don't do that. I'm probably more self-deprecating than most authors. But the books are about other people and the amazing things I watched them do and what I learned from them.
Wow. I kind of wish that we hit the record button as soon as we started talking today, because unfortunately the audience missed some of what you're talking about. It's like we all have struggles. I still have struggles. Mike still has struggles. He's trying to figure out certain parts of his business, right? He's ebbed and flowed. He's trying to find product market fit. He's moved around to different things. And we were talking about entrepreneurship for a while. And, Mike, I think what a lot of folks don't know is they see me, well, you got this, huge brand now, and, you're serving thousands of vets. You got this huge company, you're uber successful. What they don't see is how much I still struggle. What they don't see is how many times I failed before we became what we are now. And the 8 companies that I tried before that, that failed, right? And for different things. I was going to have a coaching business, then a consulting business. Then I was going to be a speaker. I was going to talk about generations and millennials. I had a website that talked about, stupid stuff. I mean, like jokes. I mean, I've tried so many things that didn't work before I found what God truly put me on earth to do, which is to serve veterans and give them hope. It took a long time to get there. It wasn't just like I just woke up one morning and this was the one and it went. This was like iteration 10. And by the way, we existed for almost 2 years with no product or no service. I was still trying to figure out how we were going to make this work. And, people, when I share that stuff with them, they're just like, what? Like, that doesn't even make sense. And I'm like, I know, because you're not an entrepreneur. You haven't tried and failed. You haven't tried 10 businesses to get to where you are today.
I have so much more respect for somebody who's given it a shot and failed.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at one of the most failed special operations missions in history, which is now known as a watershed moment, but that was Operation Eagle Claw, the failed hostage rescue attempt of the 52 Americans in Tehran. That was Delta Force's really their first operation. And 8 Americans were killed, and they had to leave those Americans behind because a C-130 had collided with a CH-53. And look at Delta Force. They're now one of the premier counterterrorism units in the world.
Yeah.
And they have probably failed 1,000 times since then. But they embrace that. That's part of the process. They don't have to love it, but they have to respect it. They learn and they move on. And, there was a note left by some British contractors in Oman at the airfield they based out of, which they returned to after the operation. It said, "From us all to you all for having the guts to try." Now, entrepreneurship is one of the hardest things I've ever done because I didn't have the mastery of the skill sets like we did at the tier 1 level. And I think that's the difference. But, with this growth mindset, there's 2 things that you understand. One, life is one big problem. And like, I see people lose their composure because problems are thrown at them. And it's just like, bro, that's life. If you're action oriented, if you're a problem solver, you solve the problem. And guess what? You move on to the next problem that's coming around the corner, or the 4 that you've already been presented. And you don't lose your composure. Once you accept that life is one big problem and it never stops, like, I accept that challenge. In fact, in the book, I said, and again, everything I learned or everything I write is like oral history passed down. I don't have one creative thought in my mind. This is oral history passed from all my peers, all my mentors and coaches in life that maybe I've uh, formed my language around and then passed down to the next generation, which is the whole point. But I wake up in the morning and say, hey, it's sort of like the motto of the SEALs, the only easy day was yesterday. But I say to myself, today's going to be tougher, but that's what I'm here for. Literally that. Wake up. God bless, I'm alive. Today's going to be tougher, but that's what I'm here for. And not everyone has that mindset. Just because you're a veteran doesn't mean you have that mindset. Just because you're a veteran doesn't mean you're a high performer in the military, which likely means you're probably not going to be the highest performer in the civilian market or the civilian sector. Like, I respect everyone for their service. I do. God bless you. And we need more people like you. But when it comes to vets, are we talking about performance? Because that's a different subject. I mean,
Yeah.
if everyone was a top performer in the military, then everyone would be ranked 1 out of 100. But 100 people can't be ranked number one. There is a performance curve. And I just be cautious. I don't know if I was a performer in the military or not. I know the level I made it to. And when I made it to that level, I definitely was not the top performer because I was surrounded by like absolute studs. But, a lot of veterans that are out there complaining, like, if you dive into their past, it's like, hey, was this guy a performer in the military? Oh, no, he really wasn't. He was an underperformer or a mediocre performer. And I don't view my service, and I think a lot of veterans need to change this. Like, my service was a privilege, not a right. And it's not something that when I get out, I can hold over people's heads because I volunteered. I raised my hand. And I want our volunteer force to be I don't want it to be 1%. I actually hope that gets to like 10% of our society, almost like creating the warrior caste again, which is not a bad thing because it already seems like, and I've actually got some statistics for you. I just went on Fox News that will blow your mind. But we go forward to face the things that we do so that the 99% or the 90% don't have to. And I'm glad that we carry this burden and they don't. And yes, they will never truly understand. But again, it's not our job to teach them. So want to throw this out really quickly. You'd be surprised. So 30, actually tighter than that. I want to say 40%. It's actually plus, it's like 44% of our military actually comes from the region of the US they call the Southern Smile, from the mid-Atlantic coast in a curve all the way down to like Texas. And it's that what they call the Southern Smile. 42 or greater, 44% of our entire military comes from that region. That's what we call disproportional. The other thing too is that of like the Army recruits, 80% of like brand new Army recruits have somebody in their immediate family that served prior to them. The same families continue to send their young to defend our nation. That I do take a little bit of problem with is, I would encourage more men and women to go serve their nation because it is a leadership incubator at the same time, a leadership incubator or leadership, a master's in leadership. If you listen, you learn, and you apply it within not only your military profession, but when you get out.
It's powerful. Very powerful. I'm gonna have to go look up some of those stats. Mike, we're getting ready to wrap up. This has been awesome. I appreciate you being on today. What would you say to military veterans? This is a two-part question. Those who compare their service to others, and those who really are just being jerks to other vets. And I'm gonna stipulate these two questions.
Mhm.
The first part is, so I was on with Marcus Luttrell not too long ago, and we were talking about part of the problem is, we start comparing ourselves to the service of others, and we discount the value of our service because somebody else, had it worse than me or was actually kicking indoors, shooting people in the face, and I didn't get to do that. And so the dangers of comparing yourself with others, I think is number one. And then the second part of that is you mentioned this briefly. Golly, we are just horrible to each other. I mean, gang, like I see this too. Like we got to stop being so rude to each other. I mean, I see like these message boards online. I mean, you should see some of the stuff people send to me. And it's like, holy moly. Like, would you say that to my face if we were together, or
Mm,
are you just hiding behind Twitter? Because that's pretty ugly, man.
mm.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
So somebody once called those the keyboard warriors. I'm like, do not use that word. They're the keyboard cowards that hide behind their anonymity and have some handle that does not have their real name and some picture of some cartoon character or whatever. Like cowards. My simple language for that is go fuck yourself. Like you don't have a voice or a vote if you want to hide behind some anonymous handle. You've acquiesced that right. If you want to have a conversation, let's come together and have that conversation. But let me see who you are and what you've done. So, comparison is the thief of joy. And here's what I'll say. I took pride in the fact that I was a bridesmaid and never the bride. What I mean by that is I was part of a team that won and I helped contribute to that win, but I was never the fastest, the strongest, the best shot, the best diver, the best skydiver. Like I was none of those things, but man, was I proud to be part of a team. And that's what you are. And I know when you get out, time does not heal wounds. And sometimes like a bitterness forms even within units. Look at the first of the 506, the famed Band of Brothers from World War II. I bet there was friction there about so-and-so got more attention in the documentary series or not documentary, but the series. And I did more than them. And that's just a endless path that will just fester within you. Comparison is the thief of joy. And I look at it this way too. Whenever I like meet Vietnam vets or like Korean vets or World War II vets, and they start telling stories and they're like, hey, do you have any combat stories? I'm like, nope, not a single one. Nothing that would ever rival what you just said. So there's no reason for me to say it. Um, Funny enough, Brian, there was a recent the 82nd Airborne chorus went on America Got Talent, and I don't watch America Got Talent or America Has Talent, whatever the name of the show is. The clip went viral, and these guys came out marching and then saying "My Girl," and I reposted it on my. I'm like, yes, 82nd Airborne chorus representing. Well done, boys. And the amount of like comments I got from guys that like served 4 years and they're like, yeah, this made me cringe. They're all pogues. I'm like, who freaking cares? Everyone served in their capacity and everyone contributed. Look at special operations. Yes, it's the sexy thing kicking indoors. First off, I was an officer towards the latter half in my tier 1 and I'm far from the door, but I'm still supporting the guys and that was my job and I'm fine with that. But who cares? Like we would not have been successful in special operations if it wasn't for the intelligence analyst who are reading on average 500 pages a day, if it was the logistics specialist who just would figure out how to get all this equipment from point A to point B to support us in, for a mission or go find it because we needed it. Your admin assistants that made sure that everyone's pay was on time and that their wills were squared away for peace of mind when we deployed. To my operations specialists who made sure that all our ducks were in a row. Like, dude, had that gone on like my SEALs to do, we would have been probably 50% less productive. So everyone plays a role in this, like, oh, but they're pogues. Like, dude, that's a immature 20-year-old, maybe early 30-year-old like argument. It's like somebody when they ask me like, who's better, Green Berets or SEALs? I'm like, I'm not going to answer that question. They're both amazing units. And sometimes it's personality dependent or unit dependent, and who, whether they had a great leader that set the tone, either a senior enlisted or an officer. But those are JV immature questions. Respect people for their service and be careful what you say. Like if you're running your mouth and you have one combat deployment and you're running your mouth around a bunch of like tier 1 guys, like who will probably just shrug their shoulders. But if you keep on going and your mouth is shut, like no surprise, dude. Um, I'm weary around who the stories I tell and who I talk around. And when I do speak to companies, I'm very, very upfront, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. But I was part of some pretty amazing teams. And let me tell you about what I watched amazing leaders do, not necessarily myself. And that's often the case.
One of the things that I've really noticed just about you, Mike, and some of the top special operators that I've ever met. I've met a lot of team guys. And you're right, they're not all the same. And those who were the best are typically the most humble, kind, gentle students, learners. I mean, like, and you wouldn't necessarily suspect them. Like one of the top operators that I've ever met looks like, you know, a 45-year-old dad, hipster, shorts and a hip polo shirt with flip-flops, living in San Diego, just kicking it. This guy is lethal. I mean, he is lethal. And it's up here for him. Like, he's just a student of life, but you'd never know. He's like the most humble, unassuming dude you've ever met. And that's
Yeah.
how you are.
Nah. Well, one, I was not even close to being the best. I do appreciate that, but as I get further, and I'm actually glad this is happening. Um, as I get further away from my service, I just sort of shrug my shoulders now, and I'm like, yeah, I served my country to my maximum capacity in the best way I could, and that's for others to decide whether I did a good job or not. But it's not that I'm losing pride in the fact that I served. I'm finding more comfort in the fact that I was surrounded by such amazing men and women who are highly flawed and who were great at their jobs, who sometimes struggle when they get out because they can't get over that hurdle of losing their tribe. And I understand it. It's like your DNA, dude. It's part of all our DNA now. And some people just have troubles overcoming that and letting it go and moving on. And that does not mean, again, that is not an indictment of their character or who they are as human beings. We all struggle with things. Some move past things quicker than others. That's just life. But also, just stop passing judgment on people unless you have all the facts. I met a recent MARSOC Marine Silver Star recipient who had a rough life, and I would not have known that if he didn't open up. And when he did, I'm like, damn, dude, what you've overcome. Like, I had good parents. We were never financially in want. Like, I hear his story and I'm like, bro, I've not faced adversity like this guy. And I probably would have made some judgments based off judging a book by its cover. But once he opened up and told me his life story, I was just in awe and admiration for the man that this person is.
Wow. Mike, thanks. Is there any before we go here, any last minute nuggets or knowledge bombs you want to share with our audience? And then how can people get in touch with you or find you online?
Oh man, as my old man says, who is my greatest mentor, uh, life isn't a puzzle to be solved; it's a mystery to be lived. Live it well. Always be proactive. Always have a bias for action. You will put all the work in, and sometimes things won't work out to your benefit. But that is life. It's what you choose to do after you fall that defines you as a human being. I say as a man or a woman. Um, and this is not easy. Let's not sugarcoat it. The transition is not easy. It's you're leaving a culture that put an emphasis on we over me into a society that puts me over we. In the military, we value things like conformity, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Conformity to standard operating procedures, to the way we looked. That's called a standard. And that's a pretty damn good standard. Conformity to height and weight standards. Man, we wish we had those in society. Healthcare would be a lot less expensive. So, that is a transition that just, again, not sugarcoating it, it sucks. And there is just, you're never going to find a tribe like you had in the military. And some people can't get over that. And I think some people eventually take their lives. That's because they miss that. And that breaks my heart. And I've even heard vets denigrate the vets who take their lives. Um, don't, man. Again, like I've had some warriors who've ended up taking their lives who I will never pass judgment on. And the only thing that goes through my mind is what must they have been dealing with? And why didn't they reach out and just simply say, hey, man, I'm not right. Like something's off. And what culture are we creating that he felt or she felt she couldn't come forward or he couldn't come forward to say, hey, just exactly what I'd said. I'm feeling off and I need some help. Man, I wish more vets would just simply say, hey, I need some help. And then we put them in contact with guys like Dr. Chris Free, who have given their lives to just helping others selflessly and never take.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. How does last question here? How do we get in touch with you? How do folks find you online?
Yeah, go to Men's Journal, The Everyday Warrior. We're building that up. That's been my effort to try to help people lead impactful lives within those pillars of physical, spiritual, and mental fitness. I've also got some good guests, like interviewed Kelly Slater like a month ago, like talking about fangirling out.
That's awesome.
And I've interviewed some great people, some lesser known, some like Dave Bautista, and just trying to pick about their struggles and what they've learned. And maybe there's a nugget. So the Everyday Warrior is about taking nuggets that have led to other people's success. They're like breadcrumbs, and picking up as many of those breadcrumbs that they give to us through vulnerability, and see if they work for you. And I'm trying to monetize it so I can support my family. We'll see where that goes. I'm in control of whether that happens or not. I haven't quite seen it yet. I'll get there. I have no doubt. But the podcast, again, in the articles I write, I try to just share people's stories. I really like the storytelling thing, man.
It's awesome. Thank you for being here, Mike. Folks, this guy's a total stud. He's super humble. I know he's going to kill me afterwards for saying this, but he has become a dear friend of mine. Lives here in the local area. We've hung out and spent some time together. And I think we're going to do a little biz and do a little more life together. So find Mike Sarraille online, pick up a copy of his book, The Everyday Warrior. I learned some things. I learned some real nuggets about how to be a warrior and what does that look like day to day, and what do your habits have to be in order to be that everyday warrior. So, Mike, thank you, bro. I appreciate you.
Brian, thank you, and to all the vets. I love you guys. Take good care of yourselves.